learners, welcome to week 2 of remote learning, and this is our math lesson. Today's math lesson focus is going to be learning how to divide fractions. So the question is, how do you divide fractions? So our goal for today is that you will walk away feeling comfortable and having learned how to divide a fraction by a fraction. As I mentioned last week, I can't really show the visual learning bridge, so instead I will be your visual learning bridge. I will walk you through a couple of sample problems. Every once in a while the video will pause and it will ask you to solve a problem so that you get some practice too. So let's get started.
Before we learn how to divide fractions, we need to discuss a very important vocabulary term. That term is reciprocal. A reciprocal is pretty much, think of it like the opposite of the original fraction problem. So let me show you what I mean by that. If we have the fraction 1/2, its reciprocal, all we're going to do is take the denominator and the numerator and we're going to flip the two around. So the reciprocal will look like this. So 1/2, its reciprocal is 2/1. Or you could think of it in reverse. 2/1, its reciprocal is 1/2. So to find a fraction's reciprocal, you simply flip the numerator and the denominator. You're going to need to know what this term is to help you divide fractions. So let's start with our first problem. Here we have a fraction being divided by another fraction. So we have 3/5 divided by 2/3. Now here's the trick with dividing a fraction by a fraction. You can actually change this division problem to a multiplication problem only if, though, you change the second fraction to its reciprocal. So let me show you what I mean by that. We're going to keep the first fraction the same. We will not change that. So I'm just going to rewrite 3/5. But instead of division, I'm going to change this to a multiplication problem. And this is why I said you'd need to know what the word reciprocal means. So what we're going to multiply this by is not 2/3, but the reciprocal of 2/3. Remember, to find a reciprocal, you just simply flip the numerator and the denominator. So we will put 3 on top and 2 on bottom. Now we have a problem just like last week's. I hope you found multiplying fractions easy last week, because this is pretty much what we're going to do again. So to multiply fractions, we start by multiplying the numerators. So 3 times 3 is 9. And then we'll multiply the denominators. 5 times 2, which is 10. So we end up with 9/10. And you just always want to double check, can you simplify? And I know that 9 and 10 don't have a factor in common other than 1, so it's already in simplest form. So the answer to 3/5 divided by 2/3 is 9/10. All right, I'm going to do one more problem and model that before I have you guys try one yourselves. So here we have the fraction 2/3 being divided by 1/4. So the trick with dividing a fraction by another fraction is to change it to a multiplication problem by changing the second fraction to its reciprocal. So let's get started. So 2/3 is going to stay the same. You always leave the first fraction alone. Okay? Instead of division, though, it's going to be multiplication. And we are going to multiply it by its reciprocal. So not 1/4, but we'll flip the numerator and the denominator. So it's going to become 4/1. And now we will simply multiply the numerators and the denominators. So 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 1 is 3. So we get 8/3. But we don't want to leave it that way. That is improper. So right now it's mad at us. And to make it proper, we need to make it glad. So the first step in glad is go divide. So 8 divided by 3. I'll do that off to the side here. 8 divided by 3. How many times does 3 go into 8? 2 times. 2 times 3 is 6. And then we subtract. 8 minus 6 is 2. And we get a remainder of 2. So the L in GLAD stands for leave your answer as the whole number. The A stands for always put your remainder as the numerator. And D, denominator stays the same. The denominator was thirds, remember. So we end up with 2 2/3 as our final answer. Now that you guys have seen me solve a couple of problems, I'd like you to try one out yourselves. So here's your problem. 1/8 divided by 1/4. So go ahead and try that out. All right, let's see how you did. So the trick with division when it comes to fractions is to flip the second fraction to its reciprocal. So 1/8, we're going to multiply that by not 1/4, but 4/1. So we will multiply the numerators first. 1 times 4 is 4. And then we'll multiply the denominators. 8 times 1, which is 8. And we end up with 4/8. Now I know that 4 and 8 both have 2 as a common factor. So we can divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2 to simplify this. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Now wait a minute. I think I can still keep going. 2/4. I know that 2 and 4 also have 2 in common. So I'm going to rewrite mine. I'll rewrite it up here and I'll circle my final answer. 2/4. We're going to divide both the top and the bottom by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now I know the numerator is 1. I know that can't be any smaller. So that is simplest form. So 1/8 divided by 1/4 is equal to 1/2. All right, let's have you try another problem to get really good at this. So here is your next problem. 1/2 divided by 1/6. So go ahead and try it out and then we will see how you did. All right, let's check your work. So 1/2 divided by 1/6. So when you divide two fractions, the trick is to change it to a multiplication problem when you multiply by its reciprocal. So the first fraction we leave alone. We're going to change it to a multiplication problem, but we're going to multiply by 1/6 reciprocal. And we do that by flipping the numerator and the denominator. So it becomes 6/1. Now we have a fraction being multiplied by a fraction. So we start by multiplying the numerators. 1 times 6, which is 6. And then we multiply the denominators. 2 times 1, which is 2. And we end up with 6/2. That's improper. I hope you caught that. So we have one more final step, which is to make it GLAD. So the G in GLAD stands for go divide. So we need to start with 6 divided by 2. So I'm going to set my division problem up off to the side here. And we ask, how many times does 2 go into 6? Well, 2 can go into 6 3 times. And then we do 3 times 2, which is 6. And then 6 minus 6 is 0. There's no remainder. So the L in GLAD stands for leave your answer as the whole number. The A usually means leave your remainder as the numerator, but there is no remainder. And that's because 6 divided by 2 is just equal to 3. So 1/2 divided by 1/6 is 3 as our final answer. All right, let's try another one so that we can get really good at this. Your next problem is 3/5 divided by 1/2. So go ahead, try that out, and then we will see how you did. All right, let's check your work. So 3/5 divided by 1/2. So the trick would be to change this division problem to a multiplication problem when you multiply the second fraction by its reciprocal. So we will leave 3/5 alone. We're going to change it to multiplication, but we're going to change 1/2 to its reciprocal by flipping the numerator and the denominator. So it becomes 2/1. So now we have a fraction being multiplied by another fraction. So you begin by multiplying the numerators. 3 times 2 is 6. Then you multiply the denominators. 5 times 1 is 5. and we end up with 6/5. Now 6/5 is an improper fraction. We don't want to leave it that way, so we have one final step, which is to make it glad. So the G in glad stands for go divide. So I will set my problem up off to the side here. So 6 divided by 5. How many times does 5 go into 6? One time. 1 times 5 is 5. And then 6 minus 5 is 1. So I end up with a remainder of 1. The L in glad stands for leave your answer as the whole number. The A stands for always put the remainder as the numerator. And D, denominator stays the same. Remember, the denominator was fifths. There's our final answer. I know it can't be simplified. So 3/5 divided by 1/2 is 1 1/5. Let's try one final problem. So this one is in story problem format. So here is your problem. Maeve has 3/4 of a bag of cat food. Her cat eats 1/10 of a bag per week. How many weeks will the food last? So if you think about that, she has 3/4 of a bag of cat food, so she doesn't have a full bag. Almost full. Her cat's not going to eat all of that in 1 week. She'll just eat a little at a time. She's going to eat 1/10 of it every week. So how many weeks will the food last? So that's asking how many times. So if she eats 1/10, then another 1/10, then another 1/10, then another 1/10. In a way, that's asking how many tenths or how many 1/10s are in 3/4, which is a division problem. So go ahead and try that out, and then we will see how you do. All right, let's check your work. So we know that Maeve had 3/4 of a bag of food, and her cat ate 1/10 of it each week. So how many tenths are in that 3/4? So here is our division problem. So when we divide fractions, we are going to change it to a multiplication problem and multiply it by its reciprocal. So we will leave the first fraction alone, change it to multiplication, but we're going to multiply by 1/10 reciprocal, which is 10 over 1. And now we'll multiply the numerators. 3 times 10, which is 30. And then we'll multiply the denominators. 4 times 1, which is 4. And we end up with 3/4. Well, this is improper, so we have another step to take, which is to make it glad. So the G in glad stands for go divide. So 30 divided by 4. How many times does 4 go into 3? Well, it can't. How many times does 4 go into 30? It can go in 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. And 30 minus 28 is 2. So we get a remainder of 2. So the L in glad stands for leave your answer as the whole number. The A stands for always put the remainder as the numerator. And D, denominator stays the same. The denominator was 4. So we end up with 7 2/4, although I noticed something. 2/4 can be simplified. So we will leave 7 alone, but I can divide 2 by 2 to get 1. And I can do 4 divided by 2 to get 2, because 2/4 is the same thing as 1/2. So 3/4 divided by 1/10 is 7 1/2. So that means Maeve's cat food will last for 7 1/2 weeks before she'd have to go and buy some more. Now, I've walked you through a few problems and you've tried some out. I hope you found this video helpful. I am also going to provide you a Math Antics video and a Khan Academy video. They walk through some more sample problems and they do it in a really nice way. So I'm hoping between my video and those two, you will find it helpful and know how to multiply, or not multiply, well in a way it's multiplying, dividing two fractions. So nice job, good luck, watch the next two videos, and then you can do the practice problem on Seesaw.